Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and well, this is the Supernova from 7th Acoustics, a company that frankly you might not have heard of, but I think you're ready for. You see, in this audio hobby, there are levels, right? Level 1, you've got your Beats, your Sony, your Bose. And at level 2, you learn about Sennheiser and Chi-Fi, and that's where stuff starts to get really good. But at level 3, being good enough, or being good, isn't good enough. So I'm starting to get really interested in kind of this category of IEMs. The 7th Acoustics is kind of a small boutique outfit out of Indonesia making hand-built IEMs to order. And, well, that sounds expensive. It's not super cheap, but given the fact that these things are, like I said, hand-built, you can customize them, and that whole process happens by you reaching out to and talking to the guy who designed and builds these things. Well, it's kind of like a next level order of value, and frankly, I'm pretty interested in that. So for $750, which is the price here on 7th Acoustics Supernova, that's what you get. And that's pretty appealing, but of course it's also gotta be a good IEM, right? It's gotta be good to live with, it's gotta sound great. And so for the past, I don't know, like 3 weeks or so, I've been living with the Supernova, trying to figure out how much I like this thing, and I'll just warn you up front, I like this thing a lot, and we're gonna talk about exactly why in this review. But first of all, the disclaimers. Like all my other reviews, this is a live stream. If you're here now live and you're hanging out, you have any questions about the Supernova that I forget to talk about, feel free to drop it in the live chat. And at the end of the review, we will have some time for back and forth conversation and hopefully answer all of your burning questions. And then also just a quick shout out to 7th Acoustics for sending this in for review as a loaner unit. This will be going back to 7th Acoustics when I'm done with it, or maybe to another reviewer. I'm actually not sure about that. I should find out. But with that out of the way, let's go back to the table and start talking about the physical stuff here on the Supernova before we get into talking about the sound, how it compares with a couple of other IEMs like this. So what you get in the box, well, I don't know exactly because I didn't get the box. I just got the IEM itself. But from what I can tell in the pictures, it looks like you get a pretty nice metal case. You get 2 different sets of tips, which include, looks like BGVP, kind of like Acoustone type tips, and then a set of final E-type tips. Maybe it's ASLAs, I don't really know. A little bit of conflicting information out there, but it looks like pretty typical stuff, apart from, well, the IEM itself, which is not entirely typical, as we kind of just covered. We'll talk first about this cable that it comes on, though, which is, I think, a very handsome copper cable. It's a little bit on the thick side, a little bit on the beefy side, but it's not unwieldy. As cables, kind of, there's like a range of like nice and thin and lightweight and functional, and then there's like super beefy and plush, but maybe a little bit cumbersome. I would say this one kind of lays like right around here. Generally a pretty nice little cable. Behavior on it is, as you can see, quite good. It's not overly stiff, not overly memory prone or anything like that. And of course it does roadie wrap well. And then, like I was saying, I think it's pretty handsome, if I do say so myself. It kind of reminds me actually of Meze's premium balance cables that they charge a lot of money for. And it's nice to see a handsome IEM cable come on this by default. But that's about as much as we can say about the cable. Well, okay, let's say it is 2-pin. I'll mention that, so you could replace it if you wanted to. And it does actually have a very functional chin slider, which I very much appreciate. But yeah, let's talk about the IEM earpieces themselves now. And a number of things I think are worth talking about this. One, the shell design and shape on this is original to 7th Acoustics. They hand build them, and it is somewhat of a different shape. Like, I haven't had this shape in a shell before. It is all kind of opaque black here from the back side, you can see, and then on the outer side you've got this abalone shell design. And it is, as far as I can tell, this is actual genuine abalone. In fact, part of the ordering process is you talk with the guy again that builds them, Steven, and he'll send you like a bunch of pictures of different abalone shells, like just organic and different and unique, pick out different colors and stuff like that, and then he'll build the IEM with the shell that you choose. This is the one that came here on the review unit, and I think it's pretty handsome. It's got kind of a green and blue tint, but some of the other ones have like purple and pink colors and stuff like that. It's as different as abalone is. If you're not familiar with abalone, it's a weird big clam-like thing in the ocean, but it's got a pretty shell for sure. Let's see, what else can I say? I guess if I'm quibbling here about the earpieces real quick, there is no notch on the nozzle and it is relatively smooth. So tips, I had a tendency to fall off, especially if I'm using these like really soft tips, which I was. Part of that's my fault. If I was using tips that had a little bit better grip on the nozzle, that wasn't so much an issue, but I did have the tips on this. These are JVC spiral dots, fall off a couple of times on me. So worth quibbling about that. But let's talk about the fit on this set because, well, I will say that these shells are, I would put them on kind of like the medium large side. They're not small, but they're also not massive. And I will say that the first time I tried these things on, I had, I think, a medium sized ear tip on it, and it turned out to be a little bit too large for me. But as you kind of saw in there, I've switched over to a very small ear tip, and the fit for me now is actually pretty stinking excellent. So here's what it looks like inside my ear, and what can I say about it? Well, one, the ingress egress, as you can see, nice and easy, apart from sometimes the tips popping off. But maybe even more to the point, like just the fit stability on this thing is pretty excellent. It's right up there with like some of the most stable fitting IEMs I've got, which I'm a big fan of, right? I like to sleep with IEMs. I like to, you know, just kind of live my life and not have to worry about fiddling and resetting it to get a good seal. It's just always nice and secure. And again, worth mentioning that it is somewhat on the medium large side. For me, it's super comfortable. But if you've got smaller ears, you know, take it into consideration that it might be, I don't know, it might be a little chunk, but it's not a problem for me. So I think that's about as much as I wanted to talk about these things. Yeah, I mean, I really like the build, and again, the fact that it's hand built and you get to customize it, that's pretty cool. So let's now talk about the sound here on the Supernova, as I arrange this in a way that the abalone catches the light ever just so. Mwah. Okay, let's talk about the sound, and like I typically do, we'll start by talking about the sound signature. What's the general flavor of the sound? And well, it's basically a neutral sound signature. It's somewhat of a low contrast, right? If you're looking for a sharp, V-shaped, exciting, bombastic sound, that's not really what the Supernova is all about. It's basically a neutral sound signature. It does have a bit of emphasis in kind of the lower treble region, which it kind of falls along the lines of like, you may be giving it a little bit of extra edge or contrast to vocals or guitar plucks or trumpets and stuff like that. And then it's also got a little bit of emphasis in the sub bass. So overall, I would just say it's a very balanced all-arounder tune. It's not going to be this type of tune that's going to satisfy bass heads, but it really does deliver a nice analytical neutral without sapping away richness that you get on some other like lean neutrals, right? This is just a nice bodyful, clean neutral sound signature, which as we're going to get into talking about what I like about the Supernova, well, that's one of the things I like. So the tonal balance, honestly, for me is just about perfect. It gives you a really clean mid-range with, again, without that lower mid scoop that you get on some other leaner neutral or like even like Harman neutral, where you lose some of that body. This does not do that. I love the mid-range tuning on this. It's basically just perfect. It preserves the full body of vocals. And then there is a little bit of lower sub bass emphasis for fun, but really it's far from being a bassy set. It's far from having the bass blur or mask any of the mid-range or anything like that. The treble, I would say, is very well extended and also pretty linear, with a dash of extra brightness in kind of the lower treble region. And you can see this in a frequency response, and you can definitely hear it when you're listening to it. Again, it just kind of adds a little bit of extra to the transients on like the vocal edge, guitar plucks, trumpets, kind of that range of frequency response. It reminds me a lot in terms of tuning to something like the Moondrop Blessing 2, with slightly less forward in the vocal region and a little bit more, just a little bit more natural, honestly, in its timbre. I would say, yeah, overall, like that's just one of the things that stands out to me a lot about this set is the timbre on it. I forgot to mention up front, this is an all balanced armature set, 6 balanced armatures, and the quality of the timbre, just how natural and realistic and like non-artificial everything sounds through this thing, I think owes a lot to that frequency response, of course, but man, it is just really good. You get a nice richness in vocals. The low end is polite, but it's sturdy, and it's really just it kind of nails the tonal stuff for me just about perfect. On top of that, I think it also has really good sense of imaging and separations. There's the Parcels Live album that I like to use a lot for testing. Just really clean presentation here on the Supernova. It's lively and kind of realistic, especially with like the high frequency percussion. And then another album I like to use a lot for testing is the Cure's Disintegration album, which just has fairly like thick tracks, thick, busy tracks that can sound kind of muddy or boring or two-dimensional on some sets. And this Supernova, honestly, is probably the set that's done that album the absolute best. One of the best executions I've ever heard. Just really clean delineations, nice speed, and also still giving a nice sense of body to the sound. It's just really, really, really satisfying. I think also probably due to the tune, again, kind of that little extra emphasis in the lower treble, as well as just well extended treble, contributes to just an excellent sense of micro contrast throughout the sound signature. You get just good sense of vocal texture, mid-range resolution, all that good stuff. And then while there is a little bit of emphasis in the lower treble, it does not come across as sibilant to me. I think that sibilance is very well controlled on this set. It's actually kind of interesting. If you look at the frequency response, you can see there's usually you'll see like an 8K peak. It seems like they're doing something intentionally to dampen that. And I don't know necessarily, I tend to associate an 8K peak with sibilance, and this doesn't have that, and it does really well with sibilance. I don't know if that's necessarily a coincidence or an intentional byproduct, but either way, I'm pretty happy with it. And just overall, what I love about this is it just gives a nice lifelike and transparent sound with just the right amount of excitement thrown in there, that if you've got tracks that are recorded well, this set is going to do them good, okay? But of course, I gotta complain about some stuff. So what do I not love here about the 7th Acoustics Supernova? Well, if I'm honest, not much. I like pretty much everything about this, but okay. I do really like the treble performance on this, but fair warning to people who maybe are a little bit sensitive to treble. The lower treble forwardness of this, again, contributes to that sense of texture, adds a little bit of edge to vocals and horns, but it's not an entirely safe tune. I would say it skirts the line. In my opinion, it never really crosses the line, but again, your mileage may vary depending on how sensitive you are to treble. I find this to be really good, but again, it's skirting the line with, for me, not crossing the line. For me, honestly, the only real demerit to the sound signature here on the Supernova would be in the bass. And it's actually really good balanced armature bass, but it is audibly balanced armature bass. It was a thing that kind of stood out to me the first time I listened to it, before I even knew what the driver configuration of it was. Is I just kind of thought, it was like, yeah, it sounds like it's probably a BA bass. It just has a little bit of a sense of dryness to it. Now, it does still have a really pretty decent punch. I think the attack is the best part on the bass here, but just sort of that sub bass, that flutter that you get from a dynamic driver doesn't quite come through here. Honestly, there were some tracks where I could have been fooled into thinking that this was dynamic driver bass, but again, if bass is your priority, this is probably not going to be the ideal set, but what you got, honestly, is pretty stinking good. So those are my thoughts here on the 7th Acoustics Supernova, but of course, like I always do, I got to bring in a couple of other items, IEMs, one of those words, or maybe even both of them, to kind of put this into context, right? Do a little bit of comparison so that we know exactly, like, okay, I really like this IEM, but I also really like these ones. So why would one choose a Supernova over these, if at all? Well, let's talk about that. So a quick breakdown of what we've got here on the table. 7th Acoustics Supernova, like we just got done talking about it, 6 balanced armature set, and the price is around $750, probably depending on the exchange rate. And then over here, we've got, punching on you, we've got the Symphonium Audio Meteor, which I reviewed not too long ago. This one's $600 and a 4 balanced armature set. In fact, all of these, of all these 3 IEMs that I have here on the table, there is not one dynamic driver of the bunch. Of course, we've got over here the venerated Moondrop S8, an all balanced armature set, as you might guess, 8 balanced armatures, and the price on this set is $700. Interestingly, you know, again, what I really like, one of the things I really like about the 7th Acoustics is its kind of boutiqueness. The Meteor from Symphonium, very, very similar in that regard. The Moondrop, while, you know, still being, I would say, firmly a level 2 IEM in terms of, like, most people are not familiar with the company Moondrop. This is more of a mass-produced IEM. At least yeah, I'm sure there are more of these being produced than there are of these, if that matters to you. All right, let's talk about how these things compare in terms of sound signature. So, like I just got done talking about here with the Supernova, it's neutral. It's got a little bit of lower treble brightness. I think just the right amount of sub-bass emphasis, and of the bunch that's on the table here, and honestly, I don't think this is very close. I think this has by far the best timbre. It's just got the overall best balance of frequency response, in my opinion. Like, these have some stuff going for them, but man, 7th Acoustics really nailed it here with the Supernova. The Meteor, well, this is a set that if you are interested in bass, this is the set for you because it definitely has the most bass emphasis. It sounds kind of a warm sound, but it still has really nice, clean treble extension. In fact, really, really good treble, which I guess we'll talk more about in the technicalities. But the tonal balance in this thing just overall leans much more toward the thick, full-bodied, bassy, kind of bombastic sound. Yeah, and then finally over here with the Moondrop S8, this is basically kind of like a Harman neutral sound signature, which you might recall me contrasting this against a Harman neutral, which gives you somewhat of a leaner, lower mid-range. Well, that's exactly what you get here with the S8. It's a lean, a more clinical version of neutral, in my opinion, versus the Supernova. It doesn't have quite that same body, it doesn't have quite that same level of richness, but it does really just give you a nice, clean, smooth, easy neutral presentation. So that's the general tonality. If I was ranking these purely on my tonal preferences, the Supernova would be first, the S8 would be second, and the very bassy but very fun Meteor would be probably my least favorite, just purely in terms of tonal balance. But they are all also just like different flavors and different, I don't know, they're all good enough that, like, depending on my mood, I would want to pick one or the other. But let's talk now about the technicalities and how they compare just in terms of more than just the tonal balance. So the Supernova, again, just really excellent sense of texturing, I think because of that treble emphasis and the really good extension, just really good sense of texture through vocals and all that stuff. Really love that. You also get really solid sense of separation and imaging. The bass attack on this set, I think, is the tightest of the bunch. Like, it's got like the most hit. Listening to things like kick drums, bass guitars, I think this comes across the most firm, if not the most emphasized. Probably my only real complaint with the technical performance on this set is, again, it is lacking some of that sub-bass rumble. The Symphonium Meteor, in contrast, I would say where this does really well isn't actually in sort of that sense of separation and layering, right? The sound in here, because it's so bassy and so warm, comes across a lot fuller and a little bit more together, I suppose, less separated. But what you get out of that is actually a really nice, satisfying head stage. Just, yeah, it's pretty nice. Again, it just kind of presents as like this big, powerful sound, and the treble on this is really what got me to go ahead and buy one of my own. It's just the treble is super clean, really well extended, and really never sharp at all. So whereas I do put a little bit of a warning sign here on the Supernova, I think the treble, while really well done and even emphasized, especially in the upper treble, I don't think anyone's going to have issues with this thing being uncomfortable. And then finally, the Moondrop S8. This is, I think, also probably a really, really good set when it comes to that sense of separation and layering and just 3D imaging especially. In fact, I would say that the imaging on the S8 is a bit further ahead versus the Supernova. It just gives that a stronger sense of that 3D sort of sound field. And then on top of that, I would say that this one presents also smoother than something like the Supernova. Again, where the Supernova can be a little bit on the edgy side, a little bit more on the textural side, the S8 comes across a little bit smoother and easier. It's just kind of top to bottom, honestly. But sometimes sometimes it comes across maybe a little bit too smooth, and it can lack a little bit of texture versus something like the S8. I think that the Supernova. I do think that the resolution, especially on the mid-range, sort of that sense of transparency, is really, really good on the S8. A lot like the Moondrop Blessing 2 that I like. But yeah, honestly, and then the last thing I'll talk about is the bass quality here on the S8. It is, again, also all balanced armature bass, and because it's kind of got that Harman tune, it's a little bit lacking in sort of like the mid bass region. But I think in the sub bass, where if you're listening to sound like, especially stuff with like electronic bass that really digs into the sub bass, the S8 might be the one that does the most satisfying and version of the most convincing imitation of a dynamic driver. If I were to rank these purely in terms of text, to be honest, this is difficult, but I would say, I would say the Meteor is probably a little bit of a step behind for me, because I really do value that 3D sense of imaging. I do think that the S8 beats the Supernova in terms of that spaciousness, but then the Supernova does a little bit better in sort of like the mid-range texturing and stuff like that, and especially in like the bass attack. So I don't know, I'm gonna put these two on kind of equal footing, but they do trade blows in different ways. And then that's going to lead us into talking now about the form factor here on the Supernova, like we just got done talking about. Really, really handsome shells with a custom touch. The fit on these I would describe as kind of a medium-large fit, but fit stability for me is fantastic. Really love to wear this. If you're looking for a really well isolating IEM, frankly, all three of these are really well isolating, but this one really did stand out to me as isolating quite well. Over here with the Symphonium Meteor, these are actually relatively small shells. I mean, small compared to other IEMs that Symphonium has done, but even here on the table, I'd say these ones probably fit the smallest. Largely that's just because they don't fit quite as deep into the ear canal. It's a nice, easy fit. I would say that fit stability is not bad on these, but it's not as next level as it is on the Supernova and the S8. And then the last thing that I'll talk about here in the Meteor is that I do think that the outer shell on this it looks a little DIY. You can kind of see it. Every time I put the light on this thing, like you can see here it looks white, and then if the light goes on it here at an angle, it looks kind of like, I don't know, it's like it's black, but like it looks like it's starting to rub off or something. I don't know. The shell design on the Meteor is not its best plot, its best base, but nonetheless, a pretty nice build. And then here with the Moondrop S8, honestly, in terms of build quality, form factor, this is, in my opinion, perfection. I love the crystal look, the crystal clear look. Like, this is one of the best looking IEMs to behold. Like, it just, it looks great. I love seeing the balanced armatures in there. It's really nice and tidy as well, which a lot of the times when you have a clear IEM, it's not so tidy. But maybe even more to the point is that the fit on this thing is also pretty stinking excellent. I would say this fits a little bit smaller than the Supernova. Call this maybe a medium fit, and it's still excellent in terms of fit stability and even in terms of isolation. I would say the only catch here with the S8 is that it is an unvented IEM. I think that's also true of the Meteor. There's no vents on it, and because of that, especially because of that here on the S8, when you fit this thing in, you might need to relieve a little bit of pressure in the ear, or it could be a little bit uncomfortable. But yeah, that is my breakdown of the form factor. If I was saying which one's my favorite, again, I kind of gushed over the S8. It's perfection in my opinion. But honestly, the form factor here on the Supernova, not far behind, and the fact this is hand built and got that extra custom edge does make it a little bit extra appealing. And then the Meteor I'll probably leave down here. So folks, I think that's about gonna wrap it up for my thoughts here on the 7th Acoustics Supernova. Obviously, an IEM I'm pretty excited about, and honestly, this reminds me a lot. This has a lot in common with some of my absolute favorite IEMs, the Moondrop S8, the Moondrop Blessing 2, but I feel like this kind of combines the best qualities of both of them into one IEM. It's got the tonal balance that's closer to the Moondrop Blessing 2, which has got that fuller mid-range. It's not quite so lean as something like the S8. Just gives you a really nice, well, even better sense of timbre, honestly, than something like the Blessing 2. And then it's got the technical performance that's pretty much on par with the Moondrop S8. Out of 5 stars, look, this probably shouldn't be a surprise, but I'm gonna go ahead and give 7th Acoustics Supernova all 5 of my stars. Now, you might have noticed earlier in the review, I was talking about, this is a review unit, and I was talking to you about what the ordering process is like. And the reason I know what the ordering process is like is because I like it so much, I ordered one. So I will have my own Supernova on the way. And if you're interested in having a Supernova of your own, I've got a link to, well, their Facebook page in the description down below. Just reach out to them on Facebook Messenger if you're interested. But otherwise, while you're down there, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, and I'll catch you on the next super review unless you're here live, in which case hang out and let's keep chatting.